Hi everyone, and welcome to this exciting policy paper launch on the future of EU-UK relations. We're really happy that you could join us today as our policy researchers at our think tank, A Path for Europe, will present their recommendations on how the EU and the UK can enter a strong partnership in the future. So my name is Anette, and I'm the co-founder and director at A Path for Europe. And I've had the pleasure of managing this project and to work with many brilliant PfEU researchers that you will also get to know today as we delve deeper into this topic. So the day will be filled with much exciting content, starting with this short opening session, where I will introduce our think tank, the topic of this paper, and also what you can expect from today's conference. So our policy paper has focused on cooperation within 4 important fields. And following the opening session, it will be my pleasure to hand over the floor to our migration team that will be talking about possibilities for cooperation on external migration policy. And thereafter, we will turn our attention to security cooperation with the focus on Europol and information sharing. And coming back then from a short break, the focus will be on competition policy and more specifically antitrust, mergers, and state aid. And the last session will deal with the possibilities for an interconnected EU-UK emission trading system. So that was a bit about today, but who are we and what is A Path for Europe? So we are an independent nonprofit think tank based in Berlin, and we're specifically focusing on EU affairs with an aim of providing advice on the path the EU should take towards a prosperous future. And we're a very young think tank, founded in 2020. And we're also solidly comprised of young researchers from the young generation. And we at the Path for Europe seek to give them university students, PhD students, young professionals, the opportunity to engage with this topic and also to share their perspective on policy developments, shedding light on topics that our generation think is important. And as a think tank, we conduct research, develop policy advice within 5 specific topics, namely migration, democracy and governance, environment, foreign affairs and security, and finally, finance, trade, and digital internal market. We believe that these areas are particularly important for the future of the EU, as they are fundamental for free, prosperous, and secure union. And besides our research work, we also have an event platform called Future Hubs. And through that, we want to foster engagement for the EU and also bring together decision makers, academics, and the young generation. So that was shortly about PfEU. And now we turn to the topic of today, the exciting stuff. So what brought us then to write about the future of EU-UK relations? So after 47 years of EU membership, the UK left the Union and began a transition period with the quest to agree on the terms of the future EU-UK partnership and conclude a deal. And this would prove to be an extremely challenging task. And up until just a few days before the transition period would end, there were great fears that the UK could crash out of the Union in a no-deal scenario. And insights into this process and possible progress on different issues addressed by the agreement was quite limited, and discussions focused a lot on the trade aspect in particular. And the parties were stuck on the issues of fishing rights and competition rules. And this you probably heard and read in a lot of media. So this in the end threatened the prospects of a deal. So to say the least, the negotiation of an agreement was a very complicated affair. But on the 24th of December, only 1 week before the UK would formally become a third country to the EU, the parties agreed to extensive concessions and decided on the final version of the agreement. So this trade and cooperation agreement, as it's called, consists of an unprecedented free trade agreement, also an ambitious cooperation on economic, social, environmental, and fisheries issues, a close partnership for citizens' security, and an overarching governance framework. And this ambitious cooperation agreement was really important to allow for continuous cooperation between the countries and also the different parties that would have been very affected by this, such as law enforcement agencies and businesses, just to name 2 examples that would otherwise have been cut off. So this agreement, of course, could only go so far, and Brexit will still have a great impact on the UK, but also the EU, as some structures that have been in place for so many years will no longer be. And for citizens, for example, free movement to live, work, and study will no longer be possible. In trade and services is not really facilitated. And these are just 2 brief examples of this. And while the UK, of course, has regained the freedom it desired with Brexit, it will most definitely come at a great cost. And this new freedom could also incentivize the UK to diverge from EU rules. That's also a possibility, despite then the tariffs that this would result in, which could also be very damaging to both parties. And it's of course obvious that the UK would never have been able to enjoy the same benefits as it did as a member state, and that relationships between the 2 could become quite strained in the future. But negotiations on the terms of cooperation will most likely continue in the future as the parties start experiencing the effects of the trade and cooperation agreement, for example, that by no means addressed all the important interests voiced post-Brexit. And with this in mind, we do believe that cooperation can actually go further, and that it is necessary in some cases, that if the EU and the UK were to strive for a strong and beneficial partnership in the future, that this is then a necessity. So because of this, we think it's important to think beyond the trade and cooperation agreement already if the EU and the UK are to strengthen their partnership in the future. And this is also what our authors have done. So a little bit about our process and our paper. We really wanted to write about this topic on the future of EU-UK relations already in October. It was announced that the agreement should be concluded, but it was postponed. It was postponed time and time again. And as probably many others, we started preparing for a hard Brexit when they finally concluded the agreement on Christmas Eve. So that was a happy moment. And these uncertainties were, of course, very problematic, but it did make it a very intriguing topic to write about. So on the project, we were 9 authors, and all had different expertise. And together, we chose to focus on 4 policy areas corresponding to our focus at PfEU, namely external migration, security, competition policy, and environment. And our analysis has focused on specific tools, mechanisms, and frameworks of cooperation within these 4 fields, the positive impacts that these means of cooperation has had on the EU and the UK, as well as the possible impact of Brexit on these. And we also looked at the trade and cooperation agreement and how it fosters cooperation, and concluded that in some cases it's not sufficient. And the trade and cooperation agreement is also not covering some important aspects that our paper then has focused on, such as the emission trading system. So We have concluded that other agreements and closer cooperation is indeed needed and desired. So our authors have proposed a few policy options and laid out recommendations for the path the EU and the UK could take in the future. So what can you expect from today's conference? So you can expect a brief overview of the trade and cooperation agreement, also an analysis of the impact of Brexit on different policy areas. Different policy options and recommendations for the future will be presented, and you will also be given the opportunity to ask questions and join the discussion on these issues. So this is a short overview of today's session again, and the migration session will follow right after me at 2:20. So stay in this meeting to join that talk. And if you want to join the other sessions but haven't registered yet, you can find the links on our event channel that is in the chat. And you can also find that on our social media channels or through our webpage directly. So you can find us on social media on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook with @Path4Europe. And if you want to tweet about the event, you can use the hashtag @PfEU. And again, welcome and thank you so much for joining this policy paper launch. We're really happy to have you here, and I hope you enjoy this conference. So in just a few minutes, Maria will introduce you to the section on external migration policy. So see you in a moment at 2:20.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first presentation of our policy paper launch. My name is Maria, and I'll be presenting the external migration section of our project, which I co-authored with Michela Pellegatta, also a research associate from A Path for Europe. Just a brief remark before we start, our Q&A section will be at the end of our presentation. So please feel free to post your questions, and I will gladly answer them then. A little bit on our research project. So we decided to focus on external migration because the intention to cooperate in this matter has been clearly stated by both the UK and the EU since the beginning of Brexit. It was expressly set out, for example, in official documents such as the future relationship between the UK and the EU, drafted by the UK, and the political declaration for the future relationship between the EU and the UK of the European Commission. However, none of the parties managed to reach an agreement on the terms and specific ways in which this coordination will take place in the future. The joint declaration, which was issued at the end of last year, only stated that although both blocs recognize the importance of migration, the UK will only negotiate everything related to this matter, specifically with state members. So, at the beginning of negotiations, the UK government offered to continue to cooperate with Frontex and Europol to strengthen EU's external border and combat organized immigration crime, and asked in turn to remain being a member of the Dublin System and have access to EURODAC. However, this was not agreed by the EU. Therefore, our research focused on identifying the shared interest both blocs have on external migration for them to cooperate in these matters in the future. Our outline for this presentation, we will begin with a background on UK's perspective on migration. Then we will go through the concept of external migration and the policy EU follows on this matter. Afterwards, we will focus on the two aspects of external migration. This is third country cooperation and external border management. And finally, we will present our policy options for each aspect and finalize with our recommendations on external migrations and some final remarks. So going to the background, migration has always been a critical topic for the UK, and the country has always been reluctant to fully integrate into European migration policies. It opted out of the Schengen Agreement along with Ireland back in 1995, which allows for the free movement of people, and has implemented controls at its borders ever since. Immigration concerns also represented a driving factor in Brexit in the referendum in June 2016. People in favor of Brexit claimed that the UK lost control over the number of migrants, especially illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, and migrant workers from East Europe when the UK joined the EU. In this sense, one of the goals of Brexit was to regain full national sovereignty on its borders and implement a new immigration system applicable to all people, independently of their country of origin. So before Brexit, opting out of the Schengen Agreement only allowed the UK to effectively control its borders regarding non-EU citizens. Under EU law, the UK was obliged to allow the entrance of EU citizens within its country. Now, with the new points-based system, the UK can now control the entrance of all immigrants to their country, whether EU citizens or not. But what is external migration, or what is the concept that includes external migration? External migration is one of the aspects of migration management which shapes and regulates a state's approach with regard to migration. And the concept of external migration refers to international migration. This is the movement of people across international borders to a country that are not nationals, as opposed to internal migration, which refers to movement of people inside a country. Our research on external migration covers or includes immigrants that need international protection because they are individuals or groups who are unable to return to their place of origin because this could infringe the principle of non-refoulement. The principle of non-refoulement is a principle of international law that impedes a state to deport or extradite immigrants when his or her life or freedom will be threatened at the country of origin, or they could be subject to torture. and also covers irregular migration, which refers to all immigration carried out outside of the migration framework. This includes people, for example, whose asylum claim has been denied by a state and therefore lose the right to stay in the country. The EU's policy on external migration is based on two pillars, or two main aspects. The first one is cooperation with third countries, and the second one is external border control. On one side, it partners with sending and transit countries to find agreements in the areas of returns and readmissions, to send back irregular migrants who reach Europe, and to address the root causes of migration. This is carried out under the global approach on migration and mobility, which we will refer in this presentation as GAM, and diverse migration and development funds. On the other, the EU cooperates with neighboring countries with the aim of externalizing migration and border management. To externalize means in border practices to transfer the control of EU borders to foreign countries, like the EU has done in the past with Turkey. The final outcome sought is to limit migratory flows to Europe by stopping migrants before they reach the EU's physical border. Additionally, the EU has or holds several institutions like Frontex and Europol that help member states located at the external border to maintain control, as well as systems to identify who already entered the Union, as it does with the Dublin System and EUUK. So we will start with the first aspect of external migration. This is cooperation with third countries. Here we're going to talk about the GAM and the development funds, development and migration funds. So the GAM represents the overarching framework of the EU external migration policy and defines how the EU conducts its policy and dialogues in cooperation with third country. It is envisioned to be a general approach and method which can be applied with any non-EU country. This framework is based on four equally important pillars, which is organizing and facilitating legal migration mobility, preventing and reducing irregular migration and trafficking in human beings, promoting international protection and enhancing the external dimension of asylum policy, and maximizing the development impact of migration and mobility. So these are implemented through a spectrum of tools, which include legal and political instruments, as well as operational support. And there are two types of partnerships. The mobility partnerships, which we will refer to as MP, and the Common Agenda on Migration and Mobility, which we will refer to as CAM, not to be confused with GAM. Both offer a political framework for comprehensive and tailor-made dialogue and cooperation with partner countries. MP is envisioned to be the principal framework, and it covers all four pillars of the GAM. The CAM, by contrast, is an alternative framework that can be used by the EU when both parties are willing to establish some form of cooperation, but are not ready to enter into the whole set of obligations and commitments, such as visa facilitation or readmission agreements. The CAM can be later transformed into an MP. And about this, with Brexit, it is important to note that at the end of the transition period, the UK lost all the rights and compromises derived from the agreements the EU has already signed with third countries. Going to the development and migration funds, it is important to note here that the EU is the largest donor of development assistance in the world. The member states use this as a strategy to decrease migration flow by addressing the root causes of migration. Specifically, resources are targeted at origin and transit countries to improve things like infrastructure, good governance, rural development, among other projects. This improves the quality of life and decreases the incentive to immigrate to other countries. In 2019, the UK accounted for 23% of the total amount of official development assistance provided by the EU to third countries. With Brexit, however, the percentage will decline significantly from this year on. Furthermore, the UK, before Brexit, provided resources to development and migration funds of the EU, such as the EU Trust Fund for Africa, the Conflict Stability and Security Fund for Libya, the EU Trust Fund in response to the Syrian crisis, and the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund for the period from 2014 to 2020. It will not, however, provide resources in the future because of Brexit. So, is there a reason for both parties to compromise and coordinate on this aspect of external migration? A no agreement scenario after Brexit on third country operations represents a loss for both blocs. For the EU, this meant losing a key partner to promote and push forward development strategies in origin countries to address the root causes of migration and decrease the incentive to migrate to the Union. Not only resources for official development assistance and migration will decrease in the future, but also the leverage to push forward more agreements under the GAM framework. For example, the UK may have a preferred communication channel with countries pertaining to the Commonwealth. For the UK, though, it is now able to implement its own external migration policies, and no further agreement scenario means losing the rights derived from the GAM framework, which were entered into by the EU on behalf of its members. This includes losing benefits derived from readmission agreements, which might be useful for the UK to expedite the process of returning irregular migrants to their countries of origin. And although the UK may still rely on the customary international law principle that a state is bound to accept the return of its own nationals from another country, this principle is limited, like we said at the beginning, by the non-refoulement principle. And this might make it a little bit more complicated for them. For these reasons, we believe that an agreement on cooperation with third countries is achievable and even desirable by both parties. Going to the second aspect of external migration, which is external border management, we're going to talk about how countries actually manage their external border and what happens or what is the impact of Brexit in this system. So how does external border support work in the EU? The Schengen Border Code provides EU states and Schengen associated countries with a set of common rules that govern external border control with the aim to control irregular migration and trafficking of human beings while preventing any threat to the member states' international security. Member states, as well as Schengen associated countries, have the obligation to deploy appropriate staff and resources to carry out the external border control and assist each other. For this, member states benefit from operational support and capacity building provided by EU institutions. So the first one is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, also known as Frontex, the European Asylum Support Office, known as EASO, and the European Police Office, which is known as Europol. Together, they contribute to the prevention and identification of cross-border criminal activities, assist members in forced returns of migrants that were not granted asylum or have exhausted all legal ways to legitimize their stay within the EU. The UK, not being a member of the Schengen Agreement, has been excluded from full membership of, for example, Frontex, and does not participate directly in this with this operational support system. However, it has actively participated in some operations. So in 2015, during the migration crisis, it participated in more than 6 Frontex operations. Further, it engaged actively in border management by participating in Operation Sophia back in 2017 and training the search and rescue teams in the Mediterranean. Lastly, the UK has participated in diverse operations with Europol as well to tackle migrant smugglers, like Operation Muga and Operation Bashtek in 2018. But how has the UK managed its external border not being a member of the Schengen Agreement, and how does that work with the EU? So to control the immigration flow entering UK's territory, its government has relied on juxtaposed border control with France and Belgium. On February 2003, the UK entered into an agreement with France, also known as the Le Touquet Treaty, to establish juxtaposed controls at the maritime border. Further, in 2004, a tripartite agreement was signed by the UK, France, and Belgium to introduce pre-boarding immigration control on departures from the Brussels Eurostar station to the UK. These agreements were entered into member states while being members of the EU and were facilitated by their tie to the EU framework. Now, with Brexit, it is important to know that migration is a shared competence between the Union and the member states. In this sense, if no further agreement with the EU is reached on this matter, the bilateral agreements the UK enters into with member states will be limited by local jurisdiction on migration governance and will not include the use of Frontex or other EU's operational agencies to control the border. Now, going through the Dublin System and EUUK, which is part of this external border management, for those immigrants who require international protection, the EU has the Dublin III regulations, which establish clear procedures regulating the criteria and mechanisms for determining which EU member state is responsible for examining an asylum claim made in the EU. The most common criteria used under this system is the first entry principle, according to which the member state through which the asylum seeker first entered the EU becomes responsible for examining his or her asylum claim. To identify migrants, the EU uses a database system known as EUUK, which collects identity details as well as fingerprints of asylum applicants. With this database, member states can ascertain whether a person has already irregularly entered or made an asylum application in another participating state. This, in turn, allows member states to identify asylum seekers that start a new application on another member state once the country they enter into has denied its claim or is pending, and allows them to return asylum seekers to their first entry country until their application is resolved. The UK has been a strong supporter of the Dublin system since its implementation and has searched for an agreement that allows him to replicate it outside of the EU. However, as stated at the beginning of this presentation, no agreement has been reached on this matter so far. So is there a reason for both parties to compromise and coordinate on external border management? A no agreement scenario after Brexit means that for the EU, it will lose the support of the UK for operations carried out by Frontex or Europol, as it has done in the past. Additionally, Brexit means for the creation of a new external border and creates a probable future challenge for the EU. UK's new framework on migration could incentivize irregular migrants currently residing in the UK to migrate to the EU if the conditions for asylum are perceived to be more achievable within any of the member states, in contrast to the UK. For the UK, stakes seem to be higher, enforcing the principle that those in need of protection should claim asylum in the first safe country they reach is particularly important for a country as the UK, as irregular migrants who want to reach its territory usually go through other EU countries. Not having a replication of the Dublin system nor access to EUUK means that the UK is now bound by international law to process all asylum applications from immigrants entering its country from now on, without being able to return them to the first EU member state they entered, nor to their country of origin, if this is not safe for the person seeking asylum. For these reasons, we believe that an agreement on external border management is achievable if both parties manage to conciliate their interests. So we're going to start with our policy options. So from what I've said so far, it seems there are shared interests from both the EU and the UK to compromise and coordinate future activities on external migration matter. On this part, we identified specific policy options for each aspect of external migration. So starting with cooperation with third countries. As said before, for the EU, the continued engagement of the UK on cooperation with third countries is important. Having the UK as an ally and supporter gives the EU a higher leverage while pushing forward cooperation with third countries, especially the ones belonging to the Commonwealth, as well as more resources to destine to the funds to address the root causes of migration. On the other side, the UK has a strong interest in remaining part of the GAM and the readmission agreement signed by the EU in order to expedite the process of returning irregular migrants to their countries of origin. The logical solution to this problematic will be for the EU to suggest to the UK its support for third countries to extend or sign agreements, similar to those of the CAM or MP. In return, the EU could ask the UK to continue to provide financial support to the existing funds. However, on this matter, it is important to know that the UK does not necessarily need the EU for this after Brexit, as it can now enter into agreements with their countries as any sovereign country. Therefore, in this aspect of external migration, we consider that the UK has a higher leverage than the EU to reach an agreement on future cooperation with third countries and might not be interested in partnering with the EU. On border control, there seems to be a clear imbalance between the interests of the two parties as well. For the UK, a no further agreement scenario on external border management will mean not replicating the Dublin system or being able to access EUUK, leaving the government to process all asylum applications for migrants crossing the channel to the UK. Furthermore, since the UK is planning to enter into agreements directly with member states, as it was stated in the joint political declaration, it is important on this matter that the EU's jurisdiction establishes some limits between its member states and the Union. In the sense, the UK will not be able to enter into a Dublin-like system with individual members to return immigrants, nor will member states be able to make use of EU's operational support for controlling migration aiming to reach the UK. For the EU, a no further agreement scenario on external border management only means losing additional support in specific operations carried out by Frontex or Europol, and the possibility to having to control reverse external migration if that even becomes a reality in the future. In this case, the UK could offer to the EU to continue to provide operational support and even financial resources to control irregular migration within Europe, in exchange for replicating the Dublin system outside of the EU and access to EUUK. However, it is no longer in the interest of the EU's institutions to provide tools, resources, or even operational support to activities at the external border that could control migration flows aiming to reach the UK. The US mandate is solely to provide service to its member and in certain areas to those countries who are not members of the Union but do participate in the Schengen area. Therefore, strategies and agreements enter into in the future will not take and do not actually need to take UK's migration challenges and needs into consideration. In contrast with what happens in cooperation with third countries in this aspect of external migration, we consider that the EU has a higher leverage than the UK to reach an agreement on future cooperation with third countries and might not be interested in partnering with the EU. So, because of this whole analysis we carried out, we concluded that since the leverage that both parties hold at each aspect does not provide for a solution which conciliates each party's interest, our recommendation is a mix between them that takes into consideration all issues derived from external migration management. So the EU has two main leverage options towards the UK regarding border management, either supporting the country in border control management along the channel or allowing it to remain part of the Dublin system. It is recommended that the EU pursues this second option and thus allows the UK to replicate the Dublin system. This, because this could represent a more effective leverage tool for the EU to negotiate future cooperation on external migration matters with the UK. The UK does not strictly need the EU for controlling the migration flows along the channel, as it can also cooperate with France and Belgium as individual member states, as it has done in the past. Conversely, there is no other way for the UK to relocate most of the migrants entering its territory after they cross the EU borders, if the country does not manage to remain somehow or replicate the Dublin system. In exchange, the EU should request the UK to continue to provide financial and operational support to address the root causes of migration and limiting the migration flows to Europe. Furthermore, the EU should propose the UK to contribute with financial and operational activities to control EU external border, an issue that affects both blocs. Especially, EU could seek UK's help to control the Western migration flow, which includes the Mediterranean and Western African routes, which have seen an increase in migrant smugglers in recent years. Including these components in a partnership agreement, we believe will lead to a balanced framework for future cooperation, while also will leave scope for both parties to develop joint actions on migration issues affecting them both, provide more structured support for controlling external borders and reduce smuggling of migrants, and will allow for continued and reciprocate support to address the root causes of migration. So once again, me and Michela Pellegatta, we thank you for your time, and we are now open for questions. Okay, so we have a first question. Could not the UK simply remain part of the GAM framework if both parties agree to this? Okay, this is a good question. Since the partnerships or the agreements that the EU has signed with third countries were done by the EU as a representative of the member states, you cannot actually just extend that framework to third countries. You would actually need to either enter into new agreements with these third countries or ask for their permission to extend this framework to the UK, although he's not a member of the EU anymore. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. There is this question: what role does humanitarian ideals play when it comes to establishing cooperation with member states, especially with the country of first point of entry, and to shed the hostile attitude towards refugees and asylum seekers? Can you further elaborate that one? Because I'm not sure exactly what is the question. Perfect. If you want to talk, I mean. I think it's muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. No, because I was just trying to understand that maybe it's too early to see the future impact of this policy in place. But based on the earlier migration patterns, and as you have been saying throughout your presentation, that it all depends moving forward with the member countries, as UK would like to have individual cooperation agreements with these countries. So what role does humanitarian ideals play? Because I mean, how much importance is given to the circumstances because of which asylum seekers or refugees seek to move to, say, for example, a country like UK? So because the general political narrative has been hostile towards this whole migration issue, so keeping in mind that UK would not like to estrange its relationship, especially with the bordering countries, what impact or what role does these humanitarian aspects to look into the circumstances because of which such situations are arising play a role in developing their future agreements with at least the bordering countries?
Okay, now I see what you mean. So although this presentation was, and I can see what you're talking about, like it goes more on the only agreement between two parties part of it, I strongly believe that immigration and any regulation or framework that comes from now on forward, the center should be the actual immigration, the actual status of the person, because usually we put behind this humanitarian idea of immigrants who usually are fleeing from a war country or are actually moving because a situation in their own country that does not allow them to stay there. So for me, that will be the most important thing to put in the center of this new framework. Of course, the problem here would be how can the UK and the EU, because they do through development funds and help their countries, but how can they actually manage to put these humanitarian ideals at the center of the framework? Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have another one. Has the UK signed all MPs and camps? Okay, so this is an interesting question because actually the policy of the UK with the GAIM framework has always been to selectively get into the mobility partnerships. With the CAM, there are only 2 right now signed by the EU, one with Nigeria, and I think the other one is with Ethiopia. So those 2, UK is a member of it. But for the mobility partnerships, the UK has this tradition to selectively choose which ones are convenient to them. So for example, it only has entered into mobility partnerships or signed expressively with Georgia, Morocco, and Tunisia. So in this new framework, or what the EU could offer is actually support to create or replicate this mobility partnership with these 3rd countries, and that might be something that the UK might be interested in. Okay, so do we have any other question? No? Okay. So if there are no further questions, I will end this session now. Don't forget to join us for the next session on security cooperation between the UK and the EU after Brexit.